Hey there and welcome back to my channel. So today we're doing a review of water brush markers, but really quickly before we start, if you're here and you've participated in the giveaway I've hosted in my previous video, if not you can still participate, there's still a few hours left when this video is up. So go there if you want to participate. But for those who have participated already, I'm going to be uploading a video with the winners in a few days. I'm going to be posting a video announcing the winner sometime next week, I'm not sure when. So, moving on, we're talking about markers today. I got this little set of Sakura Koi water markers because I've never tried water markers before. So I decided to give it a try and test them out and see how they work because I was very curious about it. But also I wanted to sort of compare them with alcohol markers, which is what I've been using. Well, I haven't been using it that much lately, but it is what I've used before, alcohol markers, and they have a specific way to be used to blend them and to get the colors and such. So I wanted to test and compare, and this is what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna tell you a bit of my thoughts, a bit specifically about this set and about how they work as water markers, and also a bit of a comparison. If you want all of this in writing, I already have a post up in my blog that I'm going to link down below as always. As I always say, the post in the blog I feel is more organized and there's bullet points. I feel it's like more clear to read, or if you want to bookmark it to read for later. In a video I always rumble a bit more. So now let's start talking a bit about the set I got. I got a 12 set, which is a very tiny set. The price was around, I believe, 20 euros, and I think in dollars is similar. I think it was a bit less than 20, but more or less. There's also the same brushes available in a 24 set and a 48 set. I'm going to leave links down below so you can find them if you're interested. At first thought and at first use, I will say the 12 set, it is a bit limiting. Depending on what you're doing and how you're using them, it can work, because I made it work. You'll see that I made a set of 6 illustrations. They're all portraits and I make them work. So you could too. I'm just saying, I think probably the 24 set is a bit more flexible color-wise. But I'll talk a bit more about blending and such in a moment. However, for me, I feel like the 12 set was a good investment. I already have not a lot of markers, but I do have like 30 or so markers. So these ones were for a different point. I wanted to try them as water markers, but I also had in mind to test them as colored line art for my sketchbook and such. So just to make doodles with colored line art and have fun a bit with them. So a couple of first thoughts about the markers when I got them. I tested them out in my sketchbook, and the first thing I noticed was no smell. I don't know if you're bothered about alcohol smell. If you're really bothered with smell, sometimes when you're working with alcohol markers and you have, your nose like really close to the paper and you're mixing markers, blending them and such, the alcohol smell can get a bit much. And not particularly against the smell of alcohol, but when you're working with it for a while, it can get a bit much, especially if you're prone to headaches or such. I am. And sometimes I will end up with a headache because of the smell. Apart from that, one of the first observations I did for this pens were the tip. I really like the tip. It's flexible, it's pointy enough so you can get thin lines. So that's why I liked it too for line art, as I said before. And then another thing I noticed was that the colors were really bright and really saturated. I decided to make this mini illustrations. These are 6 mini portraits that I made while I was rewatching the first few seasons of Sabrina, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. The last season had came out and I barely remember the first. So I decided to rewatch the whole thing. And while I was at it, I decided to sketch a few of my favorite ladies, and of course I had to sketch Madame Satan, Aunt Hilda and Aunt Zelda. It was really, really fun. I have them up for sale with the rest of my Sabrina merch. I have stickers and an enamel pin in my store, so if you're liking them and you like Sabrina stuff, because you like the series as I do, just check the link in the description to my shop. You'll find it there. I have special offers if you buy it in packs, so if you enjoy that, check that out. When illustrating with this 12 set, I definitely came across some cons and pros, of course. After a while, I realized that I couldn't work in certain ways and I had like sort of to adapt. Actually, this clip of me doing these illustrations, there's a lot of back and forth and there's a lot of experimentation. Some of them could have been better if I knew how to use them, but I think I did well enough. If I had decided to use them only as markers, not watercoloring them, definitely I wouldn't have been able to get half the colors. The color range would have been really limited and it would have been really bad, especially skin tone. When you're trying to do any skin tone that's not white, then you're screwed, basically. As in all, really, this is pretty normal, especially in a limiting set like this. You don't have colors enough to make a good, rich black skin tone color. That's why I said that maybe a 24 set will be more flexible because it will give you a bit more range. However, I was pretty happy with the result, but that was because I found a way to work with them. And what I did was I grabbed a watercolor palette and I will paint on the palette with the brush and then add a bit of water, a drop or two. I mixed it and I mixed different tones with that, and with that I could get pretty cool skin tones, different skin tones. It worked pretty well. It was a bit hard still for poor Prudence. The black skin tone was challenging, especially because I did her one of the last portraits. I was already a bit tired because when you're fighting with a new medium, trying to figure out things, it gets a bit tiring. It gets to a middle point where you're really happy and everything seems to be working, but then you kind of get tired of it again. And I was like somehow confident that I knew how to work with them enough, and I shouldn't have subestimated it because getting black skin tones done right, it requires more concentration, at least for me, and I believe most artists will tell you the same, but also because these sets don't help. And these markers do get dark really fast. If you layer a couple of layers, they sort of get really dark because the colors are so saturated and it suddenly is too dark. That's what happened with Prudence's skin tone. I later had to go over it with color pencils and I believe I fixed it. I wish I could have done it better, but it was already done and you can't really erase markers. But all in all, I think it was pretty good. The technique of mixing the colors on the palette with the water gave it a lot of flexibility to the use of the markers. I suddenly was able to get much more variety in tones and it was really good. Also, when you watercolor the tones, the saturation drops down a bit. It's a pro because you don't always need super saturated colors. For some things you need colors to be a bit more toned down. It's a really useful tool to know that when you're using them, especially for certain things, because a drop down in saturation means you can layer more. I wasn't too happy about layering colors. If you're not watercoloring, layering colors is not that good. After 2-3 layers, it becomes just too dark. One thing I would like to say is that if you look at those set of 6 illustrations, would you think that it was on with just a 12 set? Because I wouldn't have. So definitely watercoloring gives this set like a bunch of new possibilities. It does still have some limitations, but it does give it like a really big range compared to what you have initially. If you know some basic watercoloring techniques, you can apply them as well. For example, you could lift color by wetting an area and then tap either with a dry brush or nearly dry brush or with a paper. It worked just as it does with watercolor, but you had to have it like more or less recent applied. If the color soaks into the paper, then it will be harder to erase. But if you're just applied it like a couple of minutes ago, it will work to erase it, just like you would with watercolors. So if you know some of watercolor techniques like that, that could definitely work with you as a way to get the most of these markers. I tried it really lightly, but you can also mix it together with a watercolor set. Like work with a watercolor set to apply a base layer and then work with markers on top, or the other way around. So even though I'm really happy with the possibilities of the markers and with how versatile they were, I must say that I did struggle with these portraits, as I said before, not only with Prudence's skin tone, but also to figure out how they worked and such. It does take a bit, and all the versatility can also be a con, because it can be too much right on the first use. However, I believe that after 2 or 3 uses, I'm gonna be much more eased with it, and I could definitely take advantage of all the possibilities there is. Now I'm gonna go for a quick rundown on the pros and cons I found of this marker. Some of them I will have mentioned before, some of them I might have not, so I'm just gonna quickly list them. Let's start with the positives. Very vibrant colors, and this could be a con, but you know, sometimes you need vibrant colors, so that's good. And you can also lower that saturation with a bit of water. No bleed. I tested the colors with different papers and I found no bleed at all with these markers. You know when you try alcohol markers and you're just trying to apply them carefully on a border so they don't bleed out, and they always bleed out. These don't. This is a really good pro in comparison with alcohol markers. The tip is really nice and comfortable. I really liked it. It seems good. They were relatively easy to blend. Even just as markers, you could blend them without watercoloring them. Again, the colors are very saturated and I don't think you can layer them too much, but you can layer them enough to get color blends and all of that. Now, as I'm trying to say over and over again, the ability to watercolor them gives them a lot of versatility, and it also gives a lot of extra versatility to this set. Even if it's small, I feel like you can get a lot of colors just by being able to watercolor them. They're odorless, so if you're bothered by that alcohol smell, you know this is a awesome pro. The black, I love the black because it has some sort of a purplish undertone that when you watercolor them down, it turned out so purple. I don't know, it had a lovely purplish undertone, and then also to use as mixing. As I said, this set will be really good to use as colored line art sort of thing in your sketchbook or in any piece, as long as you're not using anything that would blend them afterwards. Watercoloring is also a good way to blend them. It's actually, I feel like, the best way to blend them if you want to get smooth transitions. As an extra, you can mix them in a watercolor mixing tray and you'll get extra many colors. And lastly, I feel that these markers are a bit more flexible with your choice of paper than normal markers. With normal alcohol markers, a lot of papers were a struggle for them. And these, I just feel like you need to get a bit of a paper that's on the thicker side in case you want to apply some water. But you know, I tested it with different sorts of paper, watercolor and different papers in my sketchbook, and it worked well. Now let's talk about those cons or negatives. Some of the colors don't match at all the name or the color of the cap. Don't get me wrong, this happens with basically all markers, this happens with watercolors, it happens with tubes of paint, it happens with everything, but I just thought I'll say it because, for example, for me, something that was really bothering is that the red is not red, it is a brown. It's sort of like a burnt sienna. It was a bit bothering because it's cool to have that brown because it was really useful to mix and to use with certain things, but there's not a red in the set because then you'll move on to pink, and the pink is just a very bright neon pink. It was a bit of a weird thing to get, and it happened with other colors as well, not with all, but you know, that they don't exactly match. I feel like the most exaggerated thing was the red. There wasn't a red, but apart from that, the other colors are just slightly different. But the colors included can be a bit limiting for certain illustrations, but I already said that. I have the feeling that the tip might wear down with use. This is mainly because, you know, with any felt tip brush, the nib tends to get a bit ruined with use. I don't know, if they're better quality, they will last longer. Maybe they're really good quality and the tip lasts very long. But with felt tip pens, you should be careful of how you press on them and how you use them. Because if you press too much and in certain positions, you definitely will ruin the tip. And this is not exactly a con. Again, it's something just to keep in mind. Colors change when dry. Not exactly when you use them as markers, they didn't change that much as alcohol markers do. Alcohol markers do change on tone because when the alcohol dries out, it's sort of, the color fades a bit. And that's pretty normal. This doesn't happen as much when you use these markers just as markers, but when you watercolor them, they definitely change. So you should test them out so you can see, because when it's wet, it will have a more vibrant color and then it will sort of fade. So that was all about the markers, and now let me quickly point the differences between alcohol markers and water markers that I found with this set. Of course, I haven't tried any other, so I can't compare. But with alcohol markers, I have tested both Promarkers, that I have a good bunch, and some Copics. So just as I said with the cons and pros, water brush markers don't smell, don't bleed, and don't feel as sticky with the paper as alcohol markers are. Probably by themselves, these water brush markers are a bit harder to blend than usual markers. However, sometimes to blend alcohol markers, you will use the blender that's basically alcohol in a tube. In this case, you can use the water to do the same effect. Then the price. I feel the price is a pro. Sakura is a really good brand. I've used the Micron pens for a while and such, and it doesn't feel expensive. I think I made a calculus and it was like €1.50 or so per marker here in this set. And however, Promarkers and Copics, even though Promarkers are a bit cheaper, they range between 6 and 4 euros per marker, I believe. Just consider euros as dollars, because I think with the change of currency, even though it changes, they tend to cost more or less the same. So, and Promarkers are usually on the 3-4 euro spectrum, but they're still like minimum 3 or 4 times the price of the other ones. If you're short on money, then this set might be a better investment. Those pros and cons were mostly without the watercoloring ability. Now let's add the watercoloring ability. Biggest pro I found for the water brush markers, again, is their versatility. I mean, there's so many ways to apply them, there's so many ways to use them, different techniques you can apply them. Not only they're not as boring to use as markers because you can only use them in the same certain way, but also you can experiment, you can try different things, you can get different textures, and you can do a lot of things. And yes, I've seen people do certain things like that with markers. For example, you could sort of watercolor markers again with alcohol and use them as I will use these markers, but then it's all a bit more messy, and you know, again, the smell of alcohol all the time and such. Water is much more clean, much more nice to your brushes. I don't know if alcohol is bad to your brushes really, but it seems like it would be worse than just plain water. However, I feel like water brush markers are still not out there as much. So they're not, at least for the koi sets that I've seen, there's definitely not as much color range as you would have, for example, for Copics. So that could be a con if you're planning on just collecting different colors to use them. But for my personal use, that is a lot of mixing colors, I think you could still get as much color range if you have a set. If you have the 48 set, I think you can probably make every color possible with watercoloring them and with different techniques. And with time, I would like to test which one lasts more, because Copics and Promarkers seem to run out really quickly. There was a phase where I used them a lot and they really quickly dried out. However, the other day I bring them out, I make a quick drawing with them, and they suddenly all worked again. So I don't know, I think that it's the typical thing that if you use them 2 or 3 times, they will be dry again. So I don't know, but they seem to have a short lifespan. I want to see when I use them a bit more if these have a longer lifespan than Copics and Promarkers, but I'll let you know about that. Anything else that I find in the future about these markers, I'll update in the blog post, because I can't really update a video. So if you want to see things like that and keep updated, you can definitely sign up for my mailing list and just check out the blog. You will find ways to subscribe there, or just I'll leave the link down below as well. So that was all. I hope you liked the video. Please do leave me any questions you might have, any thoughts you might have in the comments. I'm always happy to respond and to chat with you in the comment section. And give it a like if you enjoyed it and it was useful. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye!